With this video, you're in the home stretch for installing the Cool PV system. This episode will help you install the plumbing connecting the Cool PV system to the rest of the pool system. So let's get to it. As we discussed in video 1 of this series, planning and preparation for the Cool PV system, the first step in installing the plumbing is to connect the supply and return lines. Best practices and many codes require that all horizontal runs of PVC pipe must be supported every 4 feet, and all vertical runs of PVC pipe must be supported every 10 feet. We found it's best if pipe supports on the roof are anchored in the same method as the panels, using sealed and penetrating flashings. The verticals are the portions of the pipe run that takes water from the ground up to the roof and are usually on the wall of the house and the roof. Pipe supports at the roof edge can be snug, but loose enough so as not to restrict movement and allow for thermal expansion and contraction of piping. Prime consideration should be given to system drainage and appearance when running pipes from the pool pump to the collectors and back. Another best practice is to allow for system drainage at a slight and consistent downward slope in all horizontal runs, though it is acceptable for the plumbing to be level as long as it isn't sloped against drainage. A final reminder, PVC must be painted to prevent degradation from the sun. Once you have the supply and return piping runs from the pool area to the roof edge, finish up the roof plumbing like this. First, review where you install the supply and return lines. In our example, that's here. Start by checking that all supply lines are connected to the lowest ends of their collector row and that the upper ends act as individual high points for each return. Then, place end caps on the corners of the row where the supply and return lines will not be connected. In our example, that's here. A quick way to do this is to use a panel adapter, end cap, T-bolt clamp, and a retaining ring to build an assembly like this. As you assemble, secure the end caps to the adapters using the provided T-bolt hose clamps, then tighten the T-bolt clamps with the torque wrench to 10 inch-pounds. Take note, new T-bolt clamps may cause the torque wrench to click when first tightening. Be sure the nylon clamps are properly broken in and the T-bolt clamp is actually tight before moving on. Then, insert the assembly into the panels. Panel adapters use the same slip fitting as the quick unions and should be lubricated with water. Be sure to keep the parts lined up concentrically and use care so that the O-rings do not get pinched in the process. Gently wiggle them back and forth until they insert evenly. Once they're inserted, twist the retaining rings until they lock into the tabs on each header. Next, connect the supply and return lines by first building the supply line from where the piping reaches the roof. Now, we assume you know your stuff when it comes to plumbing, so we're skipping over all the gluing to just show you the essential component assemblies. As you do so, be sure to install the T's and tap ports for each row as instructed in the system plumbing procedure and the flow balancing procedure in the Cool PV installation manual. With the supply line built, glue in a plumbing adapter to the PVC line and insert a panel adapter into the PV panel. Flush out the pipes before connecting them to the Cool PV rows and pool equipment. Next, measure and cut to length a section of EPDM hose as supplied in the panel row kit. Make sure the length is no shorter than 12 inches per Favco's installation instructions. Add in an extra 1.5 inches of slack. This is necessary as it helps to absorb thermal expansion and accommodates changes in height from panel to roof. Finally, secure the hose to the adapters using the provided T-bolt hose clamps and tighten with a torque wrench to 10 inch-pounds. Here's something to be cautious about. Over-tightening hose clamps will overstress the plumbing and panel adapters and accelerate compression in the EPDM hose. This will cause leaks. The torque wrench will click once when the 10 inch-pound setting has been reached. Next, connect up the return lines, taking care to install the T's, tap ports, and everything else as with the supply lines, and also as instructed in the system plumbing procedure and the flow balancing procedure in the Cool PV manual. As you can see here, we're creating an assembly to jump the return line over the supply line, being careful that everything is still angled to allow system drainage. As you did with the supply line, flush out the return pipes from the roof before connecting them to the Cool PV rows and the pool equipment lines. Secure the hose to the adapters using the provided T-bolt hose clamps and tighten with a torque wrench to 10 inch-pounds. The torque wrench will click once when the 10 inch-pound setting has been reached. You can see how we use the final hose connection in the assembly we built to jump the return line over the supply line, still making sure the final connection can drain correctly. One of the practical aspects of any panel install is that panels may need to be spaced out to allow for mid-row obstacles or changes in roof shape. When this happens, there are two ways to navigate roof obstacles: spacer kits, which use hoses and panel adapters to connect panels, and PVC runs, which connect longer gaps. The spacer kits work like this. First, insert a panel adapter into each header. Panel adapters use the same slip fittings as the quick union and should be lubricated with water. Second, fit the retaining rings on each panel adapter and twist until it locks into the tabs on the header. Third, cut the EPDM hose to length. Then, put the T-bolt clamps in place and then fit the ends to the panel and pipe adapters. The hose should be at least 1 foot and have roughly 1/2 inch of slack. Finally, secure the hose to the adapters using the provided T-bolt hose clamps tightened by a torque wrench to 10 inch-pounds. Now, time for the vacuum relief valve. Install a vacuum relief valve at the highest point of the return line using a rubber coupler and pipe adapter. To make it easier, before you do, review the array layout components in the Cool PV installation manual. Only one VRV is necessary for each roof pitch in a typical system and should be installed at the highest point of each array. Systems with rows on multiple roofs require an additional VRV for each pitch. The diverter valve is the on switch of the PV enhancing and solar heating functions of the Cool PV system. It should be set to both allow and prevent flow into the solar thermal system, as shown in the diverter valve graphic of the Cool PV installation manual. It installs in the pool plumbing, as you can see here. An actuator and controller will be needed when automating a Cool PV system. we strongly recommend automating the cool PV system. For the specifics of the actuator you use, follow the procedure specified by the manufacturer of your actuator. By positioning the valve in the diverter flow graphic of the cool PV installation manual, the actuator cams can be left either 90 degrees or 180 degrees apart, depending on the type of diverter valve used, as provided by the manufacturer. Now take note. Non-positive diverter valves are required to ensure that the system will still drain even in the event of valve or automation failure. Another thing to note, we recommend the 2877 Jandy Pro Series non-positive diverter valve, or an equivalent alternative. When installed as specified by Favco, no modification of diverter valves or actuators are necessary. Now, the plumbing to the pool. The solar thermal system is installed between the filter and additional pool equipment. The first component after the filter is a check valve. Take note, always leave room for check valves to be cut out and replaced. We recommend using pool swing or pool spring check valves, such as the 7305 Jandy Pro series. Next, the diverter valve and PVC tees are installed. Then, install an isolation valve, such as a PVC ball valve, on the piping going to the supply line to the roof. Next up, install a second check valve on the return line. These components are always installed before any backup pool heaters or chlorinators. A few important notes. Do not install an isolation or ball valve on the return line. If an isolation valve on the return line were closed while the system was running, overpressurization could damage the system. Manual solar drain valves are included to ensure that the system can drain properly. Make sure these drain valves are installed in an easily accessible location at the lowest elevation possible. They must also adhere to the placement in the pool plumbing diagram in the Cool PV installation manual, as seen here. With all of this done, make sure to flush out all pipes before they are connected to the thermal system. We strongly advise using thermal system automation with the Cool PV system. This is the point to connect those components to the system, including a controller and an actuator. Electrically operated solar connectors are available from a variety of manufacturers. When installing an automated system, be sure to read and follow the directions for the control equipment to ensure their proper operation. Now that you have the plumbing installed, it's on to video 4, commissioning the Cool PV system.